It's Tuesday, January 14th. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. From historic buildings and landscapes to keeping museums up and running, today we talk about the province's cultural legacy and what is being done to preserve it. Got thoughts on how to keep heritage from being lost to history? Get in touch. All right, when the flute is done, I start talking, and here we go. Like I said, whether it's what's needed to keep heritage from being lost, if there's a structure at risk in your community or perhaps a museum at risk, let us know. And if you've banded together to save something and you've got a story about it, I'd love to hear about that too. The lines are open, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. You can text us, 709-327-8206. Emails, thesignal@cbc.ca. Two guests in studio. I've got someone on the line already. Let me see. We've got Kate Pitcher, Executive Director of Colony of Avalon here, and Luke Quinton, President of Newfoundland and Labrador Historic Trust. Hello to both of you, who we've interviewed in different university, and we've done a couple of Colony of Avalon shows, so it's nice to have you both here together. Question for you both. Why are you passionate about built heritage? Why do you care?
That's a very good question, a very loaded question. Heritage, to me, is all about our culture. It's about our identity. It's about why we are the way that we are and how we can interact with our environment, interact with other people. So museums and heritage sites are trying to keep our history and our cultural heritage alive. I think that's very important to be able to uncover what makes us unique, what makes Newfoundlanders unique.
Luke?
Yeah, I think we're actually super lucky when it comes to built heritage in this province. You know, I just walked up to the Battery today, and there's nothing like that in basically the rest of Canada, and it's distinctive, and that's what makes it helps. It feeds into our own idea of who we are, and these buildings are part of our culture. And, just the physical, how they look, how they act, what goes on in these buildings also affects, who we are as a people and what kinds of things that we do. Like Jane Jacobs famously said, great ideas need great buildings, and we have a lot of great buildings.
What's the job or the work like preserving this stuff? How, if you were to describe where we are with it, how tough is it? Is it like, because we're going to talk about some monetary asks around this, but what situation do you think the province is in right now when it comes to preserving its built heritage?
Yeah. So the built heritage in Newfoundland is struggling, of course, as most places are within the province. But the heritage sector is very often overlooked, but it is filled with the most passionate, the most kind, generous people that exist, because part of being a nonprofit is that there are no profits. And so we try very hard to do this with shoestring budgets. We work very hard. We're very grateful for the support of the government, especially Tourism, Culture, Arts and Recreation, who do a great job of supporting us however they can, but of course there's always more needed. So if you're asking us to describe the work, I would say exhausting.
Yeah, and I'll say too, like when it's a topic like this, when I got in touch about doing the show, and then you folks kind of mentioned it, and then there's some Facebook posts that went around and everything, and then I got like a bunch of emails, and even like folks who I didn't even know about, like on my own Facebook, I was like scrolling through a couple of days ago. It's like, hey, the show was moved by a week, and call in, and Adam's got the thing, and I'm like, oh, excellent, this has just kind of got a life. You can really tell people really care in this province of Newfoundland and Labrador about built heritage, right, Luke?
Yeah, I kind of take it back to similar to the folk revival, that we saw in the 70s and the 80s. We also had a heritage revival in the same time period. In our organization, the Historic Trust, it was advocating for, really centered in St. John's largely at that time, in the 60s and 70s, but advocating for the look or the feel of St. John's to reflect its history.
Yeah.
And, we lost a lot of little battles along the way there, but I do think that we have a core membership of people in the city of St. John's, in the entire province of Newfoundland, who look at these buildings and understand that this is something that should be preserved.
Let's go to the phones. We have Jack Pinsent is on the line, who started the website Gander Airport Historical Society, I think some 15 years ago. Hi, Jack.
How you doing?
Good. Thoughts around preserving built heritage and keeping museums up and running and the importance of it in the province.
Yeah. You want some comment from me about this?
Sure. Yeah. If you got thoughts, you sent a note that I figured if you wanted to call in too. So just you can either talk about your email that you sent to me or just your overall thoughts on the conversation.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. No, I'm not here to step on anybody's toes, so don't let anybody get upset about what I'm going to talk about here.
That's always great when you preface something like that. But go ahead.
Not really. But what I was getting at, we're looking at communities that have heritage but don't have the financial town support. Like in a museum, you want to refer to it. Now, you take a small community, population 200-300 people, that has some heritage, like where they came from, what they did all their lives. Some people that left the community and became famous. We've got quite a few here in Newfoundland. Now, the best way to get that through to people is possibly through a website. Now, I mean, you can write stories or send photographs of the community the way it existed back 50, 60 years ago. So that's what I like. We started our website here in Gander. I started it up some 15 years ago. And we've had some 71,000 visitors. Well, that's a lot of people just going on and wondering, figuring out or wanting to know about the history of the airport here in Gander. Now, I've done interviews so far because of this website. I've done 2 interviews from Australia and one just about 2 weeks ago from Germany. People just calling up and say, listen, do you mind doing an interview with us and explain more about the airport and the history behind it? Now, this is something a little bit different than a small community, I know. But, they got the same result. Now, the biggest thing that I find about, just say, for example, somebody living in St. Anthony, there's no way that they're going to drive all the way to Burgeo and visit their museum. But if they can just sit in their living room and open up their computer and just go in on the website and read about how their community became to be and what they did and some of the people that live there, that's the reason why. That's the advantage of a website. You don't have to be there physically, but you have the time to read about it. And this is what's important. Sometimes you walk into a museum and you see an item there, and there's just a little card there that's describing it, but that's as far as it goes. There's nobody can give you the background to it and who used it and why they used it, this kind of thing. And this is what the website does. So that's my feelings on the whole subject.
Jack, I appreciate the email and as well as the call. And for folks, if you're using your Google button, Gander Airport Historical Society, I appreciate the comments, Jack, and be well. And Jack's gone. Great point, right? Because yes, we're talking brick and mortar, we're talking built heritage here today, but then you've got communities across Newfoundland and Labrador that there's heritage and history everywhere. And one way to preserve it, yes, having an online presence, having connections to other groups. Great point from Jack Pinsent there. Any thoughts that you want to put out?
I mean, people need to learn about this stuff. It's not just out in the ether. Yeah. So, I mean, a website like that teaches you the history of, the airport and its building is vital. I mean, most of the board members of the Historic Trust, we are people in the heritage community. I mean, you have to learn about this stuff somewhere. And often these days, we're really lucky to have books by Robert Mellon. You can read Newfoundland Modern and read about the Gander Airport in there. And, he did actual original research to find out, who designed what, where the chairs are from, who was the artist, just every little detail in there has a backstory. And, I think Jack's exactly right. We need more places resources, really.
Yeah, the that's one of the great things about social media and websites is that it allows us to share this information with a broader audience. But of course, it takes operational funds to be able to upkeep a website, to be able to get the research done, to be able to present that onto the public. So having someone who actually has the passion, who has the knowledge, who has the ability to research these things, to put it on a website is amazing. And it does really increase our audience. But of course, we do want people to come in and hear those stories. Just like he's saying, sometimes there's a little card that says, this was a broom. But if you talk to an interpreter, they will say, yes, this was a broom, but this was made this way. It was owned by this person. This was their history. This is how they made it so important for us.
Yeah, exactly. Like kind of, it's like I'm thinking of Gander, like the International Airport Lounge, and just thinking of all the ghosts walking through that place. You've got an interpreter. It's like, actually, Frank Sinatra was like in this spot right there, and that's where Queen Elizabeth II was, and whatever else, right? Castro walked through, whatever. I got a letter in my hand. Newfoundland Labrador Historic Trust for October 18th, 2024, sent to Minister Crocker, right, Tourism Minister. Well, can we talk about it?
Absolutely.
All right. So what's the ask? And why is that so important? And how do we frame this ask for people to understand what it is and what it would make up for over the years?
Do you want to get started, Kate? Because this is your baby, right?
Yeah.
If you want the letter, I actually printed it off.
Oh, perfect.
I'm not expecting you to have it memorized from October.
I mean, I spent a lot of time working on it. So, and this was, of course, a joint effort with the Museum Association of Newfoundland and Labrador, the Newfoundland and Labrador Archives, as well as the Colony of Avalon. Specifically, it started out with me realizing that we do not have enough operational funding to be able to keep going. The Colony of Avalon, along with many different museums, are struggling immensely lately to keep up with our salary requirements, to keep up with our keeping the lights on. And of course, there are so many wonderful grants out there to be able to do project operations projects, things like that. But very, very few grants exist to be able to upkeep our salaries. And if we can't pay people, what's the point of us being open? Because there are not enough volunteers to be able to keep up with the demands that we have.
Remind folks, as I will continue to parse this, but at the Colony of Avalon, right? Remind folks of what happens there when you come in, briefly.
Perfect. So the Colony of Avalon is a pretty substantial organization. We have a museum, we have an interpretation center, we have a conservation lab, we've got a dig site, we've got a 17th century kitchen, as well as a gift shop. So there's a lot of things that go on. When you first come in, you're greeted by our wonderful heritage interpreters, especially led by Lucille Hines, who is our head interpreter right now. She will take you through the history of the site. She's from there, so she's really excellent at giving you the locals' view of how this is going. Then if you would like to do a tour, we have a 16th century archaeological site that we take people out to. We give them the full rundown of what was going on here in early Newfoundland, how people interacted with their environment, how they created their life here, what made us Newfoundlanders. So they take you through all of this. We go through all of the building, all of the places that I mentioned before, and try and give people, visitors, a view of what life was like and what it takes to be able to preserve our heritage in this way.
And how many folks stop through in the run of a year when you're open?
Yeah, we're only open for about 4 to 6 months every year, and we get about 15,000 visitors. So there's a fair amount of people who come through our doors, very thankfully. A lot of people come for our Dig for a Day program, which is a joint effort between the Colony of Avalon, Dr. Barry Galton, and the Provincial Archaeology Office, because our site is very rapidly deteriorating and falling into the ocean. So we're allowed to have visitors actually take part in the archaeology and experience what it's like to be able to dig something up that nobody's ever seen before, and take that from a lump of dirt to something that is culturally relevant.
So with that, though, you're saying, hey, we don't have enough to keep things running. Problem, alarm bell, here we go. So bring us to the ask then, and from where things are to what you're asking for.
Absolutely. So we rely on what's called the CEDP, which is the Cultural Economic Development Program, to be able to keep people paid and keep our lights on. And of course, we do get 15,000 visitors a year, so we are making some money on our their own to be able to be financially viable, but it's just not quite enough. So we reached out to basically every museum that I could find a phone number for across Newfoundland and Labrador to ask if they were having the same problems, and they were. So we put together this letter to ask for $5 million over 5 years for the CEDP program to be able to support operational funding for museums, small and large, across the province.
What response did you get back?
We got a letter from Minister Crocker that basically said that unfortunately they are unable to do this at this time, which we appreciate them getting back to us, but it seemed like less of a response than we were hoping for. Luke, do you have any input on that?
Yeah, we got something similar. Basically saying, that the government supports heritage and appreciates the cultural impact, but didn't offer more beyond maybe a meeting. So
Yes.
We're hoping for more.
We are hoping for more.
I'm picturing a clothesline blowing in the wind and a very deep voice and some built heritage around. I'm referencing tourism ads, right?
Absolutely.
This is a province that loves talking about what's there to check out for tourism.
Absolutely.
But I'm hearing a disconnect between that, or perhaps noticing, between that compared to spending across the board.
Yeah, so this is part of a letter we sent, the Historic Trust sent to Minister Crocker 2.5 years ago, basically saying, we love the tourism campaign. It's fabulous. It's award-winning. We think it's great.
Lots of folks I know love it.
Yes. Yeah. And they have something like a $10 million, might have been $14 million spend on this annually. And that's all well and good. We're not arguing against that. But, when you use these heritage buildings in your campaign as often the backbone of, the scenery, the landscape, all this fabulous imagery, we need to make sure that we're supporting these buildings that, once the camera's off, might fall into the ocean.
Yeah.
So to that end, Heritage NL, which is the Heritage Foundation, which is the Crown agency that the province funds to save these buildings through a grant program, maintenance and preservation. They have something like $150,000 a year to spend for over 300 buildings. It's just not enough. That's the price of basically like a fancy shed these days.
Yeah.
It's not going to cut it, and it's not. So people who own these buildings are not necessarily getting on board. Why would I bother with the paperwork of going through Heritage NL when, the results, the reward for that can be so small?
We've got a lengthy, folks, here's the lines are open. We've got a lengthy list of people on the lines right now. And also there's a little update on the show from last week. So if you're on the line and all of a sudden Lazarenko comes in to have a quick conversation, that won't last for too long, but it's an update from last week's show, which is something we're trying out here. But first, let's go to Teresita McCarthy, who's on line 2. Hello.
Hello, Adam. Happy New Year to
Happy New Year.
you and your people.
Thank you. You too. Thoughts around the conversation today around preserving heritage and just anything you've heard so far?
So I've been involved with Heritage for 30 years. So this conversation has been said over and over and over again. But I think there's a piece that's missing, Adam. I'm getting an echo. Are you getting an echo?
No, you're loud and clear. I don't. I'm looking around the room.
Good.
Everyone thinks you sound great.
Good. So there's a piece, as I said earlier, that's missing. Yes, we protect, we preserve, we promote, we present our heritage and our culture. That's why we're here. That's what we were built to do. However, what the powers that be fail to recognize is that our heritage sites, our museums, are bona fide tourism entities. In rural Newfoundland and Labrador, when your tourist comes into your community, they come to see the only place in town that's there over and above a store or a church or a place like that. They come to see the museum. The statistics indicate that when people get off the plane, one of the first things they do is look for heritage sites. On Bell Island, where I'm the executive director, last year we saw 18,000 people in 6 months at the No. 2 Mine Tour and Museum. We have basically replaced the mining industry with a small seasonal tourism entity that employs 8 adults, 4 students, and the economic spin-offs for this small community are exponential. When we were closed during COVID, one of the main restaurants here told me, the lady who owns it told me that they were down 40% in revenue. So we need to look at it in a little bit of a different perspective. We need to say to Mr. Government, hey, we agree with Year of the Arts. Wonderful. We agree with Year of Sport. Magnificent. But where is the Year of Heritage? Where is the bandwagon that says, you know what, we have to recognize these heritage sites that are basically helping to keep rural Newfoundland and Labrador alive. So we are doing far more than protecting our heritage and culture. We're doing far more than promoting it. We are basically creating economic engines within communities. And somebody mentioned earlier about the fact that, you know, the Heritage Foundation gets $150,000 a year to help keep up buildings. You know, really and truly, I do believe that somebody somewhere needs to hang their head and say, oh, my heavens, what are we doing here? We really need to be promoting, and we really need to be supporting morally and financially these institutions that are basically holding on to our history. And while they're doing that, they're promoting their community and helping their community stay alive.
Well, I think that message is crystal clear there, Teresita, for what you have to say.
I couldn't have said much plainer than that, Adam. But you know what? I've had 30 years' experience saying the very same thing. This is a valid but old story for me, and I've been beating that drum for 3 decades. So I'm only too delighted that you allowed me to say it out loud again.
Oh, look, thank you so much for doing it. And also, we do bring the show out and about from time to time. I'd love to bring it over to Bell Island to do a show, so I'll be in touch with you.
Well, you know what? You just gave yourself an invitation.
Yeah, it's funny how things work that way. Well, let me. We'll get in touch after the show, and we'll plan something out for when you're open, and we'll bring the show over. Because a trip overseas would be great for me.
Absolutely magnificent. We'd welcome you like the flowers in May. And I want to congratulate the people who are sitting with you today for raising this very, very important issue. Kudos to them.
Thank you, Teresita.
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
You're very welcome.
Happy New Year again now.
Okay, then. Thanks again.
All right, folks, stay on the line. If you're there on hold, we'll be back to you shortly, but we've got something else, just an update from a show from last week. All right, so we've got some listener feedback / a question. On Tuesday of last week, we had a political discussion responding to the news of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announcing plans to step down. So that led to a questioner from a listener. Joining me now is the Signal's associate producer, Lazarenko. Hi.
Hi, Adam. Yes, that's right. It was during the conversation between former NLPC party president Eugene Mannin and former NDP member of Parliament Jack Harris. Take a listen.
When we look at productivity is not Canada does not follow the trend of the rest of the world.
It's been a Canadian problem for the last 30 years.
And it has gotten worse in the past 10 years.
Well, I don't know about that.
Adam, we got an email from one of our listeners asking us to dig a little bit deeper into what was said. Is Canada's productivity really at its worst? How true is this? So I spoke with Tony Fang. He is a professor of economics at Memorial University.
Yes, right. Professor Fang's been on the show a couple of times. What did he say?
So he pulled some data from past decades, and he said it is true. In the 80s and 90s, Canada's productivity rate has been keeping up with the U.S., but after 2001, it dipped, and it kept on dipping ever since. Now, that rate is at its lowest, especially compared to the other G7 countries.
So, Arlette, when we say productivity rate, what do we mean by that exactly?
Yeah, that was actually my first question to Tony Fang. He says it's a measure of a country's output compared to all the work that we put in. So basically, if you take, for example, cars, how many cars do we produce based on all the workers that we have, the machines that we have? And so basically, if you can imagine, it's how much juice we have after all the squeezing we do.
Right. And why is this so important? Why does this matter?
It matters because he says that output is connected to a better standard of living for a country. So, if we have more, that means we have more to consume, we have more to sell.
So Professor Fang tells you about decreasing productivity since 2001, right? So it goes down and goes down and goes down. It's now at its worst levels since the start of the decrease. What explanation did he give you on the why of the question?
Yes. So when I asked why, he says that's basically the $1 million question for economics, because there's different parts in here, and some of the points that he mentions was, one problem is a mismatch between workers, their level qualifications, and their jobs. He says, especially among immigrants in Canada, we have a lot of workers who are highly skilled, highly educated, but they're stuck working in low wage, low productivity jobs. And another point he mentioned was there's not enough investment in Canada for technologies. So, improving productivity through better equipment, better software, something that would help people work, yes, harder, but also smarter. And then that's all related to his third point, which is Canada has this overall problem of a lack of competition. Here's another clip from our conversation.
And especially for Atlantic Canada, sometimes I just say our employer is just too comfortable, right? We got all this natural endowment, oil, gas, precious metal, for example, Newfoundland, Labrador, and the fishery and so on. We don't need putting so much effort into innovation, investment, and so on. We can still generate a reasonable amount of revenue and profit. We are happy with that. So that's not good enough. Right? So that means we just lagging behind. We're lagging behind the United States. We're also lagging behind most of the G7 countries, right? So that means our standard of living, we probably would go down from here. So that's not very good news. So using the wise Bank of Canada governor, his message said, we are at a crisis point. It's a crisis point, we have to break the glass. That's just how serious the situation is. So this is all point to the importance of the monetary fiscal policies, how to maintain stability, economy, and even our public policies, right, to encourage more risk-taking behaviors and more investment in organization to enhance both innovation and productivity.
Adam, that was Munn Professor of Economics, Tony Fang, speaking with me from New York. So, Adam, to the original question.
Yes, the original question.
Yes, Canada's productivity rate has been on the decline for 20 years, and we are basically at its lowest point. It's its worst it's been since then. So much so that in June of last year, Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem sounded the alarm on Canada's productivity problem. At that time, he says, our Achilles heel is productivity. We have been very good at growing our economy by adding workers. We have been much less successful at increasing output per worker. Unquote.
All right, so Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem there, and this was back in June. It ties in with the question that was sent in and everything else. Thank you so much, Arlette, for looking into this.
Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, and we had a chance to ask these questions thanks to getting a note, right, flagging it for us. So thanks, Evelyn Reed, for sending that email. And if you have a question, a comment about maybe an episode or something that's going on, something from this show, you can drop us an email at thesignal@cbc.ca or leave us a voice message, I should say, 709-576-5260. Gosh, that's some moody music that we had. There was some beats for that bit. So yes, folks, thanks for getting in touch with the show. For right now, the topic of the today, built heritage. We're talking about what is needed to keep heritage from being lost. If there's a structure at risk in your community, let us know. If you've banded together to save something, I'd like to hear about that too. The lines are open, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. Two guests in studio, Kate Pitcher, Executive Director, Colony of Avalon, Luke Quinton, President, Newfoundland and Labrador Historic Trust. Before I go back to my guest, we've got Ann Madden on the line, the Museum Association of Newfoundland and Labrador. Thank you so much for patiently waiting. Ann, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Adam. How you doing?
Good. So thoughts for the discussion today?
Well, first of all, hi, hello, Luke, and hello, Kate. Thank you so much for being on the show today and doing all this hard work for us. I'm also hearing Teddy's echo, so sorry about that. But I guess you're not hearing the echo on your side.
Weird. We'll have to look into that later.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I just wanted to call in. I hopefully won't take up too much time because I know you have a lot of callers. Just wanted to explain a little bit more about what heritage is. And I know we're saying the term built heritage, but really heritage is more than buildings. Yeah. It is buildings, and that's very important. And when it comes to museums, one of my favorite definitions, which is wrong, but I think it's what many of us think of, and depending on the museums we visited as a child, was a museum is a building where foreign objects go and enjoy their final years. And I think we've all been to a museum like that. But, if you visit one of and we have over 160 museum members, and I'm sure there's more museums than that in Newfoundland and Labrador. But really, heritage is people. It's the people who used to live here. It's our indigenous cultures that many are not here anymore. It's the people that visited, like the Vikings. It's those of us that have stayed. It's those of us that are still coming. So it's heritage. While we think it's the past, it really is the present, and it definitely very much is the future. And more to Teresita or Teddy's point, it's all kinds of things. It basically is our economic driver in many of the rural communities. It is tourism. It's our education. I mean, really, Memorial University has its Faculty of Humanities. We have all our schools teaching. This is all definitely connected with the research and the work and the promotion that's actually happening here on a local level. But we're also healthcare. Lots of documentation now that when you connect with your heritage, whether you visit a museum or you visit a website or whatever the case may be, you are connecting to yourself and to your past and to your culture and to where you come from. And then, of course, as a biologist, it's not just built heritage. It's our natural heritage. And people don't think like a zoo would be a museum, but it is. We have the Munn Botanical Garden has been a member of the Museum Association and the Canadian Museum Association for many years. Our science centers, our education facilities, libraries, these are all considered heritage organizations, and many of these are actually members of the Museum Association. So our reach, our impact, what we do for us day to day, what we do for our future, and that's, I think, what many of us are thinking about, is really critically important. Two things I do want to talk about today really quickly, because I don't want to hog all the time, but I know we're going to be speaking today more of looking towards government, looking towards tourism, culture, arts, and recreation department to, give us more funding. And obviously, yes, that's the way we have to go. But really, we as individuals, and not just those of us living here in Newfoundland and Labrador, as Jack pointed out, there's websites now, there's Facebook. If you have any connection to Newfoundland and Labrador, whether you live in the province or your grandparents came from there, you can help support our local heritage in the province. Visit a museum, visit a heritage organization, and I'll outline some of these that some of your listeners may be very surprised to hear is actually a museum. Buy a membership or buy a gift membership for somebody. So when you're doing your Christmas shopping and we try to buy local, think about, is there a heritage organization that you would like to support? And obviously we want to support something that, close to our own family, but, could be just down the road from you if it's in your own community. Go shop in open their gift shops. I mean, most of our museums and heritage organizations are really twisting themselves a million different ways to try to make some money, to try to create some revenue, try to be relevant. So they all have gift shops. They all have festivals. They all put on music venues. A lot of them now they've cleared out a room and call it a conference room, and you can book that. So why not use our museums and heritage societies in your day-to-day? Call them up, see what you can do, give them a donation, support their raffle. And I know a lot of people don't like social media, but several years ago we did a digital needs assessment of our members, and there's many. But one of the startling realizations was that most of our members are depending on Facebook to promote themselves, to get their word out, because they can't afford to even support a website. So go on Facebook or Twitter or whatever the case may be, support them, like their page, share it. If you see that they're having an event, buy a ticket for it, send it on to somebody else. That means the world to them, because as Kate has pointed out, most of the people, and when I say heritage is people, and while there's many that are paid, I would say for every paid person in Newfoundland and Labrador that supports heritage, there's 10 that are not paid, and they're still working as many hours as the paid. I know that because I talk to them on the phone all the time. And then let's extend it out. So I know we're going to speak about ministers of heritage, from the Canadian government and from our provincial government, but we all have our own local MHA. We all have our own MP. Why don't you reach out to them and say, I live in Community X. We have a heritage organization here. They're having a very hard time. The volunteers are getting older. And people don't realize, these volunteers are using their own cell phones, driving their own cars, paying for the gas. I had a call just a few months ago. This gentleman, he was working. He was the volunteer at the museum. He would go to the museum before work started. He would unlock the door, let the students in. He had applied for all the funding to get the students in there. He went back to work. On his lunch hour, he went down so the students could go to lunch, and he stood on the desk. And then after work, he went down, locked up the museum, and then went home and did some paperwork. Well, this isn't sustainable. And this is getting me worried. And more to Kate and Luke's point, that letter that was sent out to the members was really a kick in the teeth, because people aren't asking for millions of dollars. They're basically asking for a stipend. For many of our members, all they want is a little bit of money to help offset their own personal costs. And again, many of these people are seniors that are doing this. They're getting a little frustrated, and they're getting a little tired. And that, to me, is where the alarm bells have been going off in the last couple of years. They're really, really struggling. So, reach out to your ministers, and also reach out to your town, your municipality, or even the local businesses in your community. They can all be supporting the local museum. And I'm very happy to say we're seeing a lot more of that. Sometimes museums, and we've had several that were literally closing, literally dying off. The volunteers had, long ago got tired with this and all the paperwork that it's associated with it. But now the town has recognized, wow, that everybody's coming into town, or the corner store recognized everybody's coming into town to see this site or to visit this heritage society. So let's give them some support. So we, as all private individuals, can all be doing a lot more to support our local heritage. And if we don't, then really who is going to do that? I really quickly want to throw out there to the staff at TCAR, those aren't the people that make the decisions of funding, but those are the people that have to deal with all the repercussions. And I will throw out one name, Christina Turner, because as the person answering the phone here at Mantle, her name comes up all the time with huge respect, love, admiration, passion. Everyone loves Christina. And this is someone that's saying, no, I can't give you the money, and yet they still feel this strongly. So for the employees that work within this, I feel their frustration. I feel their passion. And, it's a very tough job to try to be allocating a very limited amount of money to so many organizations that do really deserve it. And if you haven't visited a museum, by all means visit even our Mantle website. We're located at museumsnl.ca. people will be floored to see. We have Fishing for Success at Island Rooms, which I hope they call in. They are a fabulous nonprofit that teaches people how to fish. They don't really have a building. They're a boat. The Matthew is a boat. They have a little building, but they're doing huge amounts of work there as well. We, of course, have our Archives Association, the Newfoundland Labrador Association of Newfoundland Labrador Archivists, and most museums have archives. So for many of our members, they're involved with both, shall we say. Our cultural history, I would remiss without mentioning the rooms. It is our provincial museum. It's also our provincial archives, and it's our provincial art gallery. And hats off to the CEO Anne Chafe, who's been hugely supportive of heritage throughout Newfoundland and Labrador. So while they are a museum, art gallery, etc. themselves, they are passing that on to the province and to all our local smaller museums and heritage organizations. And are, of course, another important point is that they're also one of the main employers for our heritage people. So as people are graduating from Memorial University, if they don't have a place to work, our conservators, our archivists, our technicians, all our specialists are going to leave the province. So again, our museums and our heritage organizations need a wee bit of support to be able to hire these people beyond a 6-week contract or whatever the case may be.
More's needed, yeah. And
More's needed.
I've got a few other colleagues. Thank you so much for the call. Fantastic points to add to this conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam. Much appreciated. Take care, Luke. Take care, Kate.
Thanks, Adam.
And Matt in there, Museum Association, Newfoundland and Labrador. Before we go back to my guests, we'll quickly work through a couple other people for points. Peter Bull is on the line. Hello.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Not too bad. How do you follow that? You just hit all the points I could have mentioned, and Terrace did it as well.
Yeah, like they've been knocking it out of the park so far. So good luck, Peter, with your points.
Fantastic. well, like I said, I'm the executive director of the Battle Harbour Historic Trust up in southern Labrador, and so all the things that have been mentioned there, take that and put 9 historic buildings on an island off southern Labrador for a seasonal operation, and you can just imagine the expense and that of doing it. So, I mean, a big part of my job in the off season is looking for funding from ACOA and IET and tourism and international. Anybody who's willing to offer grant money, is where we go. But as Kate mentioned earlier, it's generally it's not operations money, and having a big operation in southern Labrador that's open for 90 days, we need as much help as we can get. And I've had meetings with the minister as well about this, and I really do think heritage is such an important part of our culture. Are who we are, that I think they could find a little bit more. And as I think it was Anne just said there, we're not talking about millions of dollars.
So, Peter, if you've had meetings with the minister too, and everyone's kind of sending in letters and having meetings and stuff, and then to not get something back on that, like why do you think that is? Are you folks not being heard? Is the case not being made hard enough? Because I'm hearing some pretty passionate stuff here today, but I'm just wondering what the disconnect is when it comes to the ask.
I don't know. I can't speak for the minister or anyone, but I mean, I think it's been said there earlier that we're a very important part of tourism. I mean, we're Battle Harbour is a tourist destination, one of the best ones in Canada, hands down. But to operate it, it's the museum and the historic buildings and all of that. And I don't know if it's seen as the tourist piece that it is. I'm not sure if Hospitality Newfoundland and Labrador, who looks at tourism, has a historic component, a museum's component. And, it really should be there if it isn't there.
Peter, I've still got some folks to work through on this. I appreciate you talking about Battle Harbour and being on the show today and just kind of bringing your perspective to this as well.
Thank you for the time.
All right. One more quick call before we go back to our guest. Robin Hutchings is on the line. Hi, Robin.
Hi, Walt. Adam Walsh. Thank you for...
Thanks for waiting. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So, you sent me a note too, right? When we had the show delayed, but in the lead up, your word went out. We're doing this show. You sent an email and about you're an emerging heritage professional working in the sector. Just what are your thoughts on preserving history and heritage in this province and why it's important?
Well, ever since I was a child, I grew up on the mainland, so I heard all the stories as a child, and it made me fall in love with the province, and that's why I think heritage is so important, because we have that connection to our identity, and it just helps us connect to where we come from and appreciate the land more. So I've only been working in the sector for 2 years, but it's made me really appreciate more the stories and what makes Newfoundland and Labrador so unique as opposed to all the other provinces.
And when you came in, right, you started working in heritage, what was like one of the first, do you have a memory for us of just one of these moments where you're just like thinking about how special things are from what you're saying and your discovery process here?
Well, when I moved here, my first job in the sector was at Manuels River in Conception Bay South. And I was hired as the Cultural Heritage and Collections Associate. So I had to design an exhibit and research community history. And now every time I walk the trails, I can just see the history that was there, and it just brings a whole new meaning to the area and to like where we were and how far we've come.
Robin Hutchings, I appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate your email, and there's a couple other folks to work through here as well in the queue. And I got to get back to my guests who've just been sitting down staring at me for the last 20 minutes. So thank you so much for the call.
And thank you so much, Adam. Have a good day.
Thanks, Robin.
And you too, Kate and Luke.
Thank you.
All right, back into the studio. How you both doing? You got your water and stuff? You're good?
Yeah.
Excellent. Gosh, lots of comments.
Yeah.
Anyone want to jump on anything in particular?
Yeah, I have a few things I'd like to jump on.
Yeah.
Perfect. First off, what Anne was saying about the volunteers that it takes to run the heritage sector, just an immense amount of volunteer hours go into this. And even within our own organization, there are misconstrued ideas that our board members are paid for their time. Our board members are all volunteers. They are excellent volunteers. The chair of our organization, whose name was Michael Harrington, just stepped down and has now been replaced by Laura Tuck. The amount of hours that they put into running these organizations is incredible. And I know a lot of heritage professionals will sit on multiple boards to try and spread around their resources as much as possible. I myself sit on the Admiralty House board. And I know many other professionals. Megan Webb sits on at least 3 or 4 different boards, and it's all to be able to try and make up for the volunteers that we are constantly losing through burnout, and so we burn ourselves out trying to keep these things going. That and the other thing I wanted to add was one of the reasons that you mentioned we might not be being heard. We are very, very small. A lot of our museums are very tiny. They are made up solely of volunteers. And so I think one of the points of this letter was to speak in unison. Yeah. So instead of being one-on-one trying to have these conversations, nobody is asking for themselves. All of this money is being asked for the entire pot, for the entire community. Nobody is looking for, you should give the Colony of Avalon X amount of dollars. No, I want museums. I want heritage sites to be given this money so that we all have a fighting chance.
Luke?
Yeah, I like what Peter said, actually. Definitely resonated with me about the perception of the heritage buildings in the eye of tourism as well. I think that we need to reframe these things. You know, we see them sometimes, in conversations as sort of deficits, but these are assets.
Absolutely.
Having those buildings in Battle Harbor are absolutely an asset that tell the story of this province. And, the same is true of buildings all over this island. If you go to Morton's Harbor, we just gave an award to a small building there. A family won a Southcott Award for restoring this incredible merchant premises that is absolutely off the beaten path. It is worth taking the detour to go see alone.
The before after on that?
Right.
Bonkers.
Unreal.
Like I'm looking at it right now. So adaptive reuse was the Southcott Award, right?
Exactly. And, it's the Osmond premises, it's called. And this is a labor of love. We're often battling and fighting these buildings that were, often from the 1800s. And it can be so difficult and frustrating at times. But more often than not, they have the way they were built and the materials that went into them are irreplaceable. If you get, Rex Passion, another award winner this year, talking about wood windows, he'll show you an intact wood window that has old growth Newfoundland pine in it, and that's why it's still, alive. That's why the window is still there. It's 140
we all used to know
years
how
old.
to make stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was a sense of pride. It was something that was done with local materials, and it was details that made this beautiful, and they were personalized, So they're hard to recreate, they're hard to match, but they're so that they tell our story.
We've got time for one more caller.
Can I say one more
Yes,
thing?
yes.
I'm so sorry.
Jump in. No, it's okay.
I will say the Museum Association of Newfoundland and Labrador, to try and keep some of those crafts alive, do have craft at risk programs that you can sign up for, that you can mentor to be able to understand how these things were done, to try and keep some of those traditional crafts and heritage alive. So I just wanted to add that in.
And we've done a couple shows around crafts at risk, which are always to have that conversation about crafts at risk, and then to have someone who's the mentor and the mentee and have the conversation together for the learning and just a lot of times the friendship that develops. Yeah. It's a very, very nice way to spend a lunch hour. I'll just say that. Benita Ryan's on the line. Hello.
Hello there.
How you doing?
Good.
Good. Thanks for calling. Thanks for getting in touch. And then I got back in touch with you, and here we are having a chat. Yep. Thoughts on the show today?
Great show. Thanks for doing this. And Adam, Luke, and Kate, great to hear the conversations. There's been a lot of good points made, so I'm not going to rehash those because they've probably been stated much more eloquently than I can do it. I'm involved in a community museum out near Blackhead, Cape Spear. We operate in a heritage structure, which was a one-room school and a church since 1879. So we've been on the go for about 30 years at this, and it is a struggle to survive. We operate on a shoestring, and more we are focused on fundraising to help pay our operations costs. And when you're doing fundraising, you're competing with a lot of other fundraising, and also you're taking time away from heritage preservation. So it has not gotten easier. It's become harder over the years. And also to the point that was made about volunteers. Yes, everything is propped up on volunteers in this sector, and this sector is a pillar of tourism. So I have a concern with our aging demographics. We have a lot of older volunteers in this sector that over time, I know of some myself personally, cannot continue. We need to attract youth, and we need funding to do that. Technology attracts youth, and that's a real challenge for us, and I'm sure it's a challenge for many organizations.
We're almost out of time, so we're going to have to leave it there, Benita, but thank you so much for this call, and I'll put it to my guests the last little bits for the end of the show, so thanks.
Thank you very much.
Benita Ryan there, give us a shout. So, 3 minutes left. Any thoughts on what was just mentioned, or as we kind of sum up the show for today, final thoughts?
I'll say something that I haven't mentioned yet, which is just that in some ways the funding component, funding Built Heritage, which is, our focus, is should be a no-brainer. Heritage NL has a sheet about this, about the economic impact of funding heritage. And by their calculation, every dollar spent yields $1.36 in revenue from either like tax or income tax. So it's a money maker, despite the fact that sometimes it can seem like, well, we're putting serious funds in this old building. Is it worth it? But absolutely, the data shows that it is worth it, and that's just the economic case. I mean, the moral case, is also strong. But it's in the same way that our film industry is leveraging funds, due to a tax credit. We need some fresh thinking in this sector, and I think it's not throwing good money after bad. It's quite the opposite, actually. These are good investments. Yeah,
and then before we go to Kate, too, I find it striking the conversation, too, today about losing heritage, and we talk about the Colony of Avalon and how that's disintegrating. I mean, we just saw what happened in the Battery with the low-pressure system. Port aux Basques, wow. Obviously, right? So there's, to layer that on top of it and the urgency required for this discussion, ever present, Kate.
I I remember when I was first starting out in the heritage field and I was working at the Conception Bay Museum in Harbour Grace, I remember being paid minimum wage and running around every time there was a storm to put plastic garbage bags up in the window to make sure that our artifacts were safe. It's astounding how much we are able to do with the resources that we have, and those resources are people, and everything that goes into heritage comes back to us tenfold, comes back to our culture tenfold, and I think it's a $5 million ask over 5 years for all of heritage sites is not incredibly difficult to achieve, and I think it's something that we have an imperative to be able to do.
And for folks who sent in notes today, I will have Arlette Lazarenko will come in over the next couple of days and read those out as well, because we are right up against it. So my friends in Greenspond, I see you, I hear you. You'll be on the show. Kimberly Orange just sent in a note as well too, so we'll read that. And it's all what I do see this as continuing the conversation as the show progresses, and then we do other shows around this. It's about connecting communities of Newfoundland and Labrador about the stuff that matters. Luke Quinton, Kate Pitcher, thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Yes, music's playing, so I guess that's the end of the show. That's it for today. Tomorrow, you may have heard about the recent St. John's Community Plan to end homelessness. Tomorrow, we take a deep dive into that plan and talk what's needed and what it would look like to end homelessness right across Newfoundland and Labrador. That is tomorrow's conversation. Don't miss it, folks. Until then, stay safe.